So, this talk will be about the Frankfurt School. I've studied communism for decades, for 40 plus years, and amazingly, this escaped me. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But just how did we as a nation get here? And of course, what is here? What does here mean? There are many, many forces acting on America, ripping it apart at the seams. Among the many, out of wedlock births. Indeed. Divorce, drugs, race relations, and, of course, George Soros. So what's been the result of the last 50 years of the sexual revolution? To talk about there's so many things ripping the country apart. We'll deal with a few of them. It would just take endless time to go through everything that's tearing this country apart right now. Out of wedlock births. Now, see, here's the red represents 2014, the blue, 1964. The contrast is absolutely amazing all over the world, from Chile all the way down to South Korea. South Korea has the least of both. The United States has an overall out-of-wedlock birth rate of 40%. That's across all races and demographics. Oops. Total is 40%. The black community has unfortunately got the lion's share of this in the inner city is 70% plus out-of-wedlock birth rate. Everybody's getting hit. And again, it totals out to 40% across the board. So, just how do we get to the point where, we have a bad thing here. How do we get to the point where California University's website says it's okay for children to engage in sexual play, watch porn, by Caleb Parker. This is sexinfo.com or something. The University of California, Santa Barbara Sociology Department features a controversial website that encourages parents to react positively when 4-year-olds touch each other's genitals and say young children should be allowed to watch porn. Called Sex Info Online, which is maintained by students who have studied advanced topics in human sexuality that seek to answer a myriad of questions on sexuality, the College Fix reported. Children might display affection, etc., which is perfectly normal. Parents should not react in a negative way because children are just exploring. That's where we're at now. It's important that children understand that viewing pornography is a normal habit and they do not need to be ashamed of it. University of California, Santa Barbara students wrote. Finally, this magazine, when they asked the Department of Sociology, declared to comment, and the university did not immediately respond to requests for comment because they can't defend the stuff. They can't defend it. They know they can't. It's not healthy. It's not a good thing. Talk to your child about sex? Yeah, absolutely. But encouraging them to touch each other, to watch pornography, it's a corrupting influence. Every single study shows it is a corrupting influence. People get addicted to this stuff. People get addicted. I knew somebody. I was going to sell something online. I met the young lady at a PetSmart, right, to do the transaction. She was selling some software. And we got to talking this and that, life, this, blah, blah. Turns out her husband is addicted to pornography. She was beautiful. There was no excuse. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I'll pray for you. That's about all I can do. I can pray for you. But yeah, it's amazing how it permeates society. So, the Bible says, now for the Christians that watching this is for a general crowd between Christians and secular people, but there's something important that we need to understand. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. This is 2,000 years ago. Timothy in the Bible is talking about a time in the future, interestingly enough, they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned to fables. If there's any time in history that that's being fulfilled, it's right now. Divorce rates. From after the war, divorce rates started heading for the floor. Families began coalescing. People were buying houses with an economic boom after the war. Cars being produced, refrigerators. The entire industrial world has to supply all the troops coming back from the war, right? So divorce rates head for the floor. So what happens about that time? Madalyn Murray O'Hair was the president of Atheists United, right? She filed a lawsuit in 1962. The United States Supreme Court decided in Engel versus Vitale that a prayer approved by the New York Board of Regents for use in schools violated the First Amendment because it represented establishment of religion. So prayer was taken out of schools at that point and never to return. One influence. That doesn't, doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it is an influence on the culture. Timothy Leary comes along. Turn on, tune in, drop out. The hippie movement starts, begins. I was right in the middle of that. I will cop to it in Ocean Beach. See, I got my mic on, I hope. Yeah. And I look back on that time with great sadness, actually, because that changed my life for the worst. So Timothy Leary comes along. Now, Hugh Hefner comes along and normalizes adultery and just wanton sexuality in the culture. So all these influences are affecting the culture. Ronald Reagan gets elected in 1980. All of a sudden, the divorce rate begins to decline immediately. Something happens to the culture. There's a conservative, he won 49 states to 1. There was a general consensus, this is the way we want to go as a nation. And correspondingly, interestingly enough, the divorce rate starts coming down. Again, time will come. So that compressed time period looks like a time where people are like leaving their senses. And we see the result now. Out of wedlock births, 70%. Massive drug addiction. People are dying from overdoses like crazy. There's illegal drugs being produced in the street in San Diego. 90 people have died this year from opiates with fentanyl in them. 1 grain of fentanyl is enough to kill you. And these things are being mass produced out of China and Mexico, and they're flooding the streets now. Enter the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. Just what is the Frankfurt School? The Frankfurt School has been flying under the radar for 60 years. Most people have no idea what the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory is. I didn't find out about it until someone suggested to me to read the 6th chapter in Andrew Breitbart's book, Righteous Indignation. Excuse me while I save the world. As I read that, I had an absolute epiphany, and I understood instantly why the country is in the condition it's in right now. And I'll go into detail. Who are the players in the Frankfurt School? There's a small cadre of central players in the Frankfurt School that we need to understand and get acquainted with. Very briefly. I'm not going to go into big, long, soliloquy about these guys, but there are things they said out of their own mouths, I can't make this stuff up, that is very significant. George Lukács from, let's see now, I have to introduce them first. Okay, so George Lukács, Antonio Gramsci from Italy, Herbert Marcuse out of Germany, Felix Wilde, Germany, Theodor Adorno, I believe, well, we'll find out where he's from, Erich Fromm was German, and Max Horkheimer. This is the rogues gallery of some of the most evil people of the 20th century. They look pretty benign, right? This is a very famous writer. He's got a lot of, #1 hits, books. But as we understand what they thought and said, we'll see it'll paint a very different picture of these people. Let's start with George Lukács. Hungarian Marxist philosopher, literary historian, critic, and founder of the Frankfurt School. He was one of the founders of Western Marxism and contributed to Marxist theory with developments of Marxist theory of class consciousness. He ideologically developed and organized Lenin's ideas into formal philosophy of vanguard party revolution. He said, I saw the revolutionary destruction of society as the one and only solution. A worldwide overturning of values cannot take place without the annihilation of the old values and the creation of new ones by the revolutionaries. This is a guy determined to bring down Western civilization. And he's only one of many. Antonio Gramsci. Now this guy's out of Italy. He was one of the worst. Antonio Gramsci is a seminal intellectual figure of international communism for several reasons. This one-time leader of the Italian Communist Party concentrated his energy not solely on theoretical and critical class warfare, but on culture. Communism, he fervently argued, must target what he called cultural hegemony. Gramsci's influence on Western atheism is particularly poignant given that he embraced Marx's idea that the role of philosophy should be to change the world, not understand it. Action is what the world needs, Marxists contend, not philosophical reflection. He's talking about riots, basically, upturning Western civilization. Meanwhile, in Moscow, this plaque appears in Moscow, and it reads, the inscription reads, in this building in 1922 to 1923 worked the eminent figure of international communism in the labor movement and founder of the Italian Communist Party, Antonio Gramsci. He also said the following, and this is ominous. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media by transforming the consciousness of society. Herbert Marcuse. Here's another real bad one. Let's get acquainted with him. Marcuse was a German-American philosopher, sociologist, political theorist. Born in Berlin, Marcuse studied at the universities of Berlin and then at Freiburg, where he received his PhD. He was a prominent figure in the Frankfurt-based Institute for Social Research, which later became known as the Frankfurt School. In his written works, he criticized capitalism, modern technology, historical materialism, and entertainment culture, arguing that they represent new forms of social control. He was a major driving force behind the sexual revolution of the 60s. He taught at the University of California at San Diego from 1965 until his retirement. Right here in good old San Diego. Amazing. Felix Weil, German-Argentine devotee of Marxism who provided the funds to found the Institute for Social Research, which became the Frankfurt School in Frankfurt am Main, Germany. Theodor Adorno was a German philosopher, sociologist, and composer known for his critical theory of society. He was a leading member of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, whose work has come to be associated with thinkers such as Ernst Bloch, Walter Benjamin, Max Horkheimer, Herbert Marcuse, for whom the works of Freud, Marx, and Hegel were essential to a critique of modern society. Erich Fromm, German-born American social psychologist, psychoanalyst, sociologist, humanistic philosopher, and the democratic socialist. He was one of the founders of the William Allison White Institute of Psychiatry, Psychoanalysis, and Psychology in New York City and was associated with the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. He had a lot to do with the sexual revolution too. He was all about Freudian psychology and like do your own thing, and he's all about that. Max Horkheimer, German philosopher and sociologist who was famous for his work as a member of the Frankfurt School of Social Research. Horkheimer addressed authoritarianism, militarism, economic disruption, environmental crisis, and the poverty of mass culture using the philosophy of history as a framework. This became the foundation of critical theory, the term he coined to embody the entire philosophy of his fellow traveler's mission to destroy existing society using the Marxist dialectic. His works include Eclipse of Reason and collaboration with Theodor Adorno, Dialectic of Enlightenment. So there's your rogues gallery to begin with, a real short synopsis of these guys. Now they had to escape Germany. Hitler hated communists, interestingly enough, as much as he hated the Jews. And these guys, most of these guys were Jews, and they had to flee Germany with their ideology. Hitler was just like them, central controller, fascistic, the National Socialists. Nazis were National Socialists. But he was so psychotic. Hitler was so messed up. These guys would have been killed if they had not escaped Germany. Marcuse later summed up the entire cabal very well. One can rightfully speak of a cultural revolution since the protest is directed toward the whole cultural establishment, including the morality of existing society. What we must undertake is a type of diffuse and dispersed disintegration of the system. Disintegration of the system. These guys are bound and determined to pull Western civilization apart. They were very serious about this. And they were successful, as we'll see. Marcuse was a former student of future Nazi philosopher Martin Heidegger, the father of deconstruction, a process by which every thought or writing from the past had to be examined and torn down as an outgrowth of its social milieu. Heidegger wasn't shy about his intentions. He longed for the moment when the spiritual strength of the West fails and its joints crack, when the moribund semblance of culture caves in and drags all forces into confusion and lets them suffocate in madness. Why, that sounds eerily familiar. Yeah, Karl Marx. Karl Marx wrote Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. Who was Marx? In his early youth, Karl Marx professed to be and lived as a Christian, actually. There's little known about him. His first written work is called The Union of the Faithful with Christ. You won't believe this. This is amazing. Here, we read these stirring words. Come on. Through love of Christ, we turn our hearts at the same time toward our brethren who are inwardly bound to us and for whom he gave himself in sacrifice. Union with Christ could give an inner elevation, comfort and sorrow, calm trust, and a heart susceptible to human love, to everything noble and great, not for the sake of ambition and glory, but only for the sake of Christ. Can you imagine? What happened to this guy? Well, very soon after, he inexplicably pens the following in his poem, Invocation of One in Despair. So a God has snatched from me my all, in the curse and rack of destiny. All his worlds are gone beyond recall. Nothing but revenge is left to me. I shall build my throne high overhead. Cold, tremendous shall its summit be. For its bulwark, superstitious dread. For its marshal, blackest agony. Who looks on it with healthy eye shall turn back, deathly pale and dumb. Clutched by blind and chill mortality, may his happiness prepare its tomb. Nobody knows. I can't find anything. Yeah, something. What did Lucifer say? I shall build my throne high overhead. Where did he get that from? He must have got that from the Bible, because if my clicker will work, what did Lucifer say? I will ascend into heaven. I shall exalt my throne above the stars of God. Isaiah 14:13. He was apparently well versed in the Bible. I wish to avenge myself against the one who rules above. It's like Hitler. Hitler, they say what turned Hitler was, one, the death of his brother and the rejection of his art. He was actually a very good artist, actually. Hitler was very accomplished, actually. But everywhere he displayed his art, people just like, go away, get out, get out. Then his brother died, and it was all over. I'm going to kill the Jews now. All of a sudden, it's time to wipe out the planet, you know. Mm-hmm. And this could be here. We're going to talk about this. Now, Revelation 13:16, again, for the Christian watching, in Scripture, Revelation 13:16 talks about a mark in the hand and in the forehead. Many people think it's going to be a mark on. People are waiting for something really obvious on the forehead or on the hand, on the hand. Oh, you won't be able to buy and sell. There's going to be a chip. There's all kinds of nonsense going around. It says nothing of the sort. It says in. It's very specific. It's not on the hand. It's in the hand, and it's in the forehead. What does that mean? That means the hammer and sickle. What is in the hand? What is the symbol of international communism? The hammer and sickle. They're both in the hand. Workers' revolution, right? And in the forehead is ideology, communism, leftism, satanic, Luciferian ideology. In the forehead. It's not on the forehead. What's in your forehead? Your brain, how you think, your ideology. Both of his daughters, Jenny and Laura, committed suicide. That might have been the triggering point. It's entirely possible. He had 4 kids. Laura and her husband, they were dedicated to the socialist revolution. They killed themselves together. They figured, we've done everything we possibly can for the revolution. There's nothing left for us to do, so they killed themselves. Nikita Khrushchev said, we cannot expect the Americans to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving Americans small doses of socialism until they suddenly awake to find they have communism. I'm old enough to remember Khrushchev. And in the local political realm, a 2002 report by Joel Fishman, chair of the Communist Party, USA, CPUSA, Political Action Committee, stated that the Progressive Caucus provides an important lever that can be used to advance workers' issues and move the debate to the left in every congressional district in the country. In a 2010 CPUSA report, party member David Bell identified Progressive Caucus members as his organization's allies in Congress. As of March 2015, CPC consisted of 68 members of the House of Representatives, all of them leftist Democrats, and 1 senator and presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders. He's a member of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. There's an entire organization of left-wingers that are in our Congress pulling it to the left. That's why they're advocating the craziest things. Now they just stopped any pretense of trying to hide. Members of the Progressive Cause, as of 2015, bang, bang, and this many are still there. There are many more on this list, but I just don't have the time to chase them all down. These are names I recognize right off the bat, and I just put stars by them. These are current members. Remember Charles Rangel? Yeah, Maxine Waters. I think Barbara Lee is still in there. There's a bunch of them that are still in there, but I just...
John, Elijah Cummings, he passed it.
Yeah. Right there. Yeah, Bob Filner. The only thing he did right for us as mayor was get rid of the traffic cameras. That was a big step forward. I almost got killed by one of those things. Following individual members, so there's all kinds of past members. It's a real problem that nobody knows about. It's really a problem. Reverend Richard Wurmbrandt, Romanian Christian pastor, was in a Romanian prison camp for 14 years, and he wrote this book. I've got a copy of it. Now, I'm in the book business for a long time, and I'm actually not a big reader unless something really captures my attention. I could not put this down. I read it in one sitting. Absolutely chilling. He has actual correspondence between himself, between Karl Marx and his contemporaries, and his children between themselves, etc. Actual letters, and they're absolutely chilling. And he ties Marx directly to a satanic cult that was in London at the time. Very chilling read. Absolutely fascinating. Again, there's a few books that I can't put down, and this is one of them. So, we can see in the last 400 or so years, the thrust of history is consolidating and crystallizing ideologies on the global level. From 1517 to 1648, we've got on one side the Renaissance, the revival of ancient Greek classics, etc., Da Vinci, Erasmus, Michelangelo. On the other side, we've got this is like external Cain side development. On the internal Abel side, we've got reformers, Wycliffe, Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, revival of Hebraism. The Reformation's coming in. 1517, Martin Luther nails the 95 Theses on the door of the church in Wittenberg, outlining the abuses of the Catholic Church. The Reformation is on. Boom. All hell and all heaven breaks loose at the same time. Again, these both progress into the Enlightenment, Cain-type view of life. Now we're getting, science is beginning to get on the ascendancy now. Descartes comes, Locke, deism. Ideologies about and explaining life, explaining the existence or non-existence of God are coming to the fore. Left-wing Hegelianism, Strauss, Feuerbach. The Great Awakening happens in the West. In America, a religious revival sweeps America, right? By 1789, the Constitution is ratified here, and the French Revolution begins in France at the same time, very same year, interestingly enough. Two completely diametrically opposed movements happening at the same time. Then finally, this crystallizes over 400 years into Cain-type democracy. Marxism, in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution happens, and World War I. And then on the other side, camps are beginning to form. In God we trust, free democracy, free Western democracies, and more totalitarian modes of thought are crystallizing now. So Lucifer versus God. This goes all the way back for the Christian watching. This goes all the way back to the beginnings of mankind. The battle between Lucifer and God. It all boils down ultimately to Cain versus Abel. Cain had resentment, jealousy, hatred because Abel and Cain made offerings to God. Cain's offering was not accepted. Abel's was. Abel's the young brother. Cain wants to kill Abel and does, as a matter of fact. And we see this reflected all the way down through history. Cain's side becomes eventually, providentially, Ishmael Arabic culture versus Hebrew culture, Ishmael and Isaac. This crystallizes, this is a grotesquely compressed snapshot, flyover view of history. And on this side, the Reformation. We got the Renaissance, new thought, art, culture. is beginning to be on the ascendancy. The Reformation, there's a religious revival on this side, Abel-type revival. Renaissance becomes the Enlightenment. The Reformation becomes the Great Awakening, and a tremendous explosion of spiritual activity in America. And then this eventually crystallizes in the communist world, the Bolshevik Revolution. They take over almost 2/3 of the world's landmass. Between China, Russia, and Eastern Europe, they dominate a lot of it, in many places in Africa, South America, Central America. And then on this side, with a bad clicker, we've got the democratic world, and God we trust. Seth becomes the third world. In the third world, many third world nations, whoever got there first with the most guns and butter got the allegiance. If the Russians were there first, they were their friends. You'll find many third world nations, they're using all Soviet weaponry. They're using AK-47s, they're using, what are they called? MiGs. The aircraft they're using are all MiG fighter aircraft, and Scud missiles, and all kinds of Chinese SKS rifles are all coming from the communist world because they got there first. There you have it. So, boom. So this entire left-wing movement is coming down through history, and it's something to watch out for. Now that we know this, we have to have a little more of a jaundiced eye when we hear things from the left and understand where it's coming from. It's coming usually from a place of resentment and jealousy and hatred. You hear Bernie Sanders railing against business, railing against this, railing against that, always angry and bitter. Yeah, kill the rich, eat the rich. I fully expect him to say, get off my lawn, or something. And that's really, his roots are in Marxism. He's a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America. He's very proud about that, and the site has him on there. There's no hiding it, right? So the biblical left-right paradigm, another thing we reach back in history for is, where did this left-right thing come from? Well, it's all through the Bible. Ecclesiastes 10:2, a wise man's heart inclines to the right for some reason, but the heart of the fool to the left. I am the Lord your God who upholds your right hand, who says to you, do not fear, I will help you. The blessing was given with the right hand in the Old Testament. The blessing was always given with the right hand. And he, full of the Holy Spirit, Acts 7, gazed into heaven, saw the glory of God, Jesus standing at the right hand of God, and he said, behold, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God. He's not sitting at the left hand of God. For some reason, there's some kind of aversion to the left. And there's a good reason for it, right? There is speculation, and that's all it is. There's no biblical reference. There was a thief crucified to the left and right of Jesus. It does say that. Which one railed against Jesus? We don't know. But I'll bet you it was the guy on the left. Come on down off that cross. Come on, you're the Son of God. The other guy says, hey, when you come into your kingdom, can I go? He was like totally cool about the whole thing, right? So there's our rogues gallery. Now, so what? What's that got to do with anything? The hipster queries. Well, these philosophers might have faded into oblivion, as so many Marxist theorists have, but the rise of Adolf Hitler prevented that. With Hitler's rise, they had to flee Germany. Virtually all of them, Horkheimer, Marcuse, Donau, from, were of Jewish descent, and they had no place to go except here. They came right here. Theodore Adorno taught at Columbia and Princeton. Max Horkheimer taught at Columbia, Los Angeles, University of Chicago. And Marcuse taught at Columbia, Harvard, Brandeis, and UCSD. These guys with that mentality infested the university system. The people teaching now are the intellectual descendants of these guys. How do we get to the point where co-founders of the radical domestic terrorist organization, the Weather Underground, are tenured professors at the University of Chicago? David Horowitz was a fellow traveler with the likes of Jane Fonda and Tom Hayden. They were friends. They knew each other. After the Black Panthers killed Betty Van Patter, a good friend of his, Bobby Seale, Huey Newton, Eldridge Cleaver were leaders in the Black Panther movement. Once they killed a good friend of his, Betty Van Patter, he left the left and went straight to the right, and a reliable conservative now. and really walking point. He just lives under the threat of death all the time because he's really walking point on the ideological anti-communist side. So Tom Hayden. Now David Horowitz in 1997 writes this in Salon magazine, not a right-wing rag by any means. He says, Tom Hayden and I were once comrades in arms in a movement to overthrow America's democratic institutions, remake its government in a Marxist image, and help America's enemies defeat her sons on the field of battle. Now he's running for mayor of Los Angeles, and many people are asking, does the past matter? I think it does. Hayden and I were deadly serious about our revolutionary agendas. During the Vietnam War, Tom traveled many times in North Vietnam, Czechoslovakia, and Paris to meet communist North Vietnamese and Viet Cong leaders. He came back from Hanoi proclaiming he had seen Rice Roots democracy at work. According to people who were present at the time, including Saul Stern, later an aide to Manhattan Borough President Andrew Stein, Hayden offered tips on conducting psychological warfare against the U.S. He arranged trips to Hanoi for Americans perceived as friendly to the communists and blocked entry to those seen as unfriendly, like the sociologist Christopher Jenks. He attacked as propaganda stories of torture and labeled American POWs returning home with such stories as liars. Even as America withdrew, I would challenge you to call John McCain a liar. He couldn't even raise his arms. They broke his arms so many times, right? Even after America withdrew its troops from Indochina, Hayden lobbied Congress to end all aid to the anti-communist regimes in Vietnam and Cambodia. When the cutoff came, the regimes fell. The communists conquered South Vietnam, Cambodia, and slaughtered 2.5 million people. When anti-war activist Joan Baez protested the human rights violations of the North Vietnamese victors, Hayden called her a tool of the CIA. General Giap, who was the leader of the NVA, the North Vietnamese army, he said, I won that war in your press. He publicly said that. I won that war in your press, your media. David Horowitz wrote the book The Professors, 101 of the most dangerous academics in America. It's a hair-raising book. Imagine, out of all the academics, he pulled 101. How many are there? He did an independent study of all the universities in America. They're registered 87% Democrat. You can't get a job at a university as a conservative unless you're really slick and can kind of hide that under the radar and get in there. It's locked up. So let's talk about one of those. One of those professors he highlights is Bill Ayers. Now, Bill Ayers, this is him, part of the Weather Underground. He is a co-founder of the Weather Underground, it's considered a domestic terror organization. And let me go back. Characterizing the Weather Underground as an American Red Army, Ayers summed up the organization's ideology as follows. Kill all the rich people, break up their cars and apartments, bring the revolution home, kill your parents. These are quotes these guys actually said. They've written these in books. I wouldn't make this stuff up. I don't have to make this stuff up. They're very public about their intent. This is his wife, Bernadine Dorn. Together, well, she actually knocked off a Brinks truck to fund the Weather Underground, did 4 years in prison. This is all about her. Since 1998, she has taught as a clinical associate professor at Northwestern University of Law. Still at the University of Chicago, Bill Ayers is teaching at the University of Chicago as a tenured professor. Barack Hussein Obama started his senatorial campaign from his living room. That's just common knowledge. I'm not making that up. You can research that. That's just true. He even admits it. In '74, Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, Jeff Jones, and the others formed the Prairie Fire Organizing Committee, the publishing arm of the Weather Underground. The name was inspired by mass murderer Mao Zedong, who said a single spark can set a prairie fire. They wrote a book. We are a guerrilla organization. We are communist women and men underground in the United States for more than 4 years. This is the book they wrote. And these are the bombings they committed. They actually write it in the book. And the reason is because statute of limitations has passed. They can't get prosecuted for this because of the statute of limitations. But they admitted to all the bombings and the breakout. They broke people out of jail, out of prison. And this is my list. This is their actual printed list in the book. Because they know they can't get prosecuted. So, oh, come on. How did race relations take such a dive in so short a time? Again, we're talking about a few things that are happening in the country that are creating problems. Let's take a look. Well, Trayvon Martin was killed February 26, 2012 by George Zimmerman. This is him right after the event. And one day we're going to get the back of his head too. Trayvon Martin, before he was shot, was banging this guy's head, hit him in the face and banging his head on the concrete, and that's why he shot him. Problem with this case is he called a 911 operator, and the operator said, don't engage. This was his first mistake. The operator said, don't engage. Let proper law enforcement, he was part of a neighborhood watch, let proper law enforcement, and that's where this whole thing went south. So both sides are very much in the wrong here. I would not defend George Zimmerman other than the fact that there's the stand your ground law in Florida where he could actually had the right to shoot him. Now, Barack Obama steps in March 23rd, a month later, said if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. Before this had been even adjudicated. This hadn't even gone to court yet, right? The president, everybody should stay out of it. Let the judicial system run its course, right? But he steps in, and then all hell starts breaking loose. On April 11th, Zimmerman is charged with second-degree murder, and on June 13th, about a year later, 6-person jury delivered not guilty verdict on all counts. Stand your ground law was in effect at the time. 1 month later, Black Lives Matter is created by these 3 young ladies. Here's Michael Brown. Prior to getting shot by Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, he knocks over this convenience store, walks out in the street, gets shot by this officer. Hands up, don't shoot is the rally cry. My gosh, there was hats and shirts and posters printed. It turns out it never happened. It was a fabrication to try to frame this officer. Ferguson burns to the ground. This is the bullet pattern on Michael Brown. This is classic. This is the autopsy report on Michael Brown. This is a classic case in which the officer is trying to wing him and not kill him. This is a classic pattern. What happens is when you shoot your first bullet, your gun moves up a slight bit. He's shooting fast because the kid is coming out. He's 300 pounds and he's running at full bore at the cop. He's trying to hit his arm, his left side, to not kill him, right? But the gun is going up, up. With each shot, the gun moves up. It's very hard to control your gun. He's shooting right up the arm. The last shot is as he's going down, his head is being presented, and he shoots him in the head. That's where that last shot comes from. But it's a classic case of an officer trying not to kill the guy. He wants to, you shoot. And cops are trained to shoot center mass. He's not far enough to where he couldn't have shot him center mass. They're trained to empty the magazine here, not here. He's really violating police standards to try to save this guy's life. Please don't make me kill you. So what happens? Black Lives Matter is in full gear now. Remember Frankfurt School, remember the university. These are students. A lot of these people are students. They're flooding out of universities. They're being corrupted and polluted by their teachers. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want it? Now. 2 days later, these guys are dead. Chinese and Hispanic cop killed in their car, point blank range. They were marching in the streets. I would have put the video up, but I just didn't have the time. They're running down the streets. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want it? Now. 2 days later, boom, they're gone. This young man did that. July 7, 2016, 5 Dallas policemen shot and killed protecting a Black Lives Matter rally. They were there to guard it, to make sure nothing happened, nothing got out of control by this ex-Army sniper, of all things. Again, this is all the result of what's happening in the university system. They're poisoning the minds of our children. Now, there is a problem with racism in America. We can't ignore that. That's a real problem. It wasn't nearly as bad as it is now. I believe that we've been set back to pre-Martin Luther King days now. Now we're back to Bull Connor and hoses, for gosh sake. All the progress that Martin Luther King made and the civil rights movement, I believe, has moved back considerably. Now it's very difficult to recover that ground. Very, very difficult. So, the history of Russian involvement in America's race wars. The Russians have been praying for this for 6 decades. From propaganda posters to Facebook ads, 80 plus years of Russian meddling. Except for the technology used, however, these tactics were not exactly new. They are natural outgrowths. Now, this is Atlantic magazine. This is not a right-wing bastion. This is a really left-wing publication. They are natural outgrowths of a central component of covert influence campaigns like the one Russia launched against the United States during the 2016 election. Make discord louder, divide and conquer. Covert influence campaigns don't create divisions on the ground. They amplify divisions on the ground, says Michael Hayden, who ran the NSA under Presidents Bill Clinton and George Bush and then became CIA director. During the Cold War, the Kremlin similarly sought to fake plant news and foment discontent, but was limited by the low-tech methods available at the time. Before, the Soviets would plant information in Indian papers and hope it would get picked up by our papers, said John Cipher, who ran the CIA's Russia desk during George W. Bush's first term. The Soviets planted misinformation about the AIDS epidemic as a Pentagon creation, according to Cipher, as well as the very concept of a nuclear winter. Now, because of the technology, you can jump right in. Anybody remember this man? It's a bad picture. Thomas Schumann. Thomas Schumann worked with Kausa. I spent 3 days with him. His actual Russian name was Yuri Bezmenov. He changed his name and defected to the West. He was in India. He defected out of India, disguising himself as a hippie. He worked for Novosti Press in Russia. And he told me the horror stories. He said, I couldn't take it anymore. They were feeding me stories through the Indian media, just like they just said in Atlantic magazine. They're going through India, so they have plausible deniability. They got a filter through which they're dumping news stories into Indian newspapers, and then they're feeding it to the West. So Russia can say, we had nothing to do with that. That's an Indian story. And he said, I couldn't take it anymore. I know, based on my disinformation, people are going to die. And he defected to the West. I spent 3 days with him in Arizona. Now we see the rise of Antifa. This is a very, very disturbing development. This is like the brown shirts in Germany. This is like Kristallnacht. The brown shirts just went through Jewish communities and breaking windows and beating people nearly to death. And this is what's happening now. These people, I could go on for hours. I'm not going to do it. There's so much material here, it would take days to get through it. But I tried to just find a few tidbits. We have to be informed. We have to know what's going on. We can't just glibly just kind of run through life not knowing what's going on, just think everything's just fine. It's not. We have to be, as Jesus said, be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. Wise as a serpent. Be smart. Be careful. Don't just buy everything people tell you. These people are very dangerous. And they're beginning to hurt people. Andy Ngo is a conservative Asian gay reporter who was beaten nearly to death last year by an Antifa mob. He ended up with a brain hemorrhage in the hospital, and he's still not all there, unfortunately. Now I'm going to see if I can get this to show you what's going on the college campuses. I hope this will be loud enough. This is a little clip from PragerU. I hope it'll play. Might be too loud.
What's up, guys? This is Will Witt from PragerU. Today we're on Santa Monica Beach, and we're going to be asking people some questions for the 4th of July. Why do we celebrate the 4th of July? I don't really know. Why do we celebrate the 4th of July?
Celebrate the independence of our nation.
Our independence?
It's our Independence Day. Independence Day.
For the independence of America.
Why is the year 1776 significant?
U.S. 1776? I have no idea.
What's the significance of 1776?
This one's rich.
Is that when Columbus sailed the ocean blue?
What is the significance of 1776?
I don't know.
I don't know. What's the significance of 1776?
I don't even know what that is.
It's a year.
Yeah, I figured.
Why do we celebrate the 4th of July? What is the year 1776 about?
About the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Well, what's the significance of 1776?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a history person.
I can tell. What's the significance of 1776?
Christopher Columbus.
Why is the year 1776 significant?
Civil War.
Oh.
Close.
The end of it. Or the end of slavery.
Close.
1776 Columbus
Yeah. That's what's happening on your universities. So, where does that leave us? That leaves us with, oops. The most trusted names in news might not be so trustworthy. Now, understand, these are just news services, right? And we're so used to them coming on and telling us things, but you have to understand, where did they come from? They were educated in universities that are dominated by the extreme left, right? These are the intellectual descendants of the Frankfurt School. These guys multiplied themselves many times over. So basically, where that leaves us is, have a more critical idea or viewpoint when people tell you things from the media. Because we have to understand, again, where all this comes from. The means of information are actually being subverted. And this is how many great societies have been brought down from inside. Slow rot. I wanted to put something up here. There's an amazing piece by Brigitte Gabriel. She started an organization, something like Americans for Freedom. She's a Lebanese born person, Christian, who came to the West. And she said the tyranny of the minority. You think that just a small group of people aren't going to be a problem. But Hitler and 3 people took over Germany. Lenin and a small group of Bolsheviks took over Russia. Mao Zedong and a small handful of people took over the entirety of China. Castro and 2 other people took over Cuba. It just takes a small group of very dedicated people in the wrong place at the right time, and you can lose your country. So that's where that leaves us. There's so much to this. Someday I'll do version 2 and put everything else in there. But I do this because we need, along with spiritual uplifting and internal guidance, we also need to be educated too. We got to be smart. Wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Hallelujah. All right, there's that.